Hi, my name's Bob Whipple, and I'm also called the Trust Ambassador. I'm here today with Nancy Settle Murphy, who's an old friend of mine. We've gotten to know each other over the years because Nancy works in the virtual space, working with teams all over the world to help them understand how to do a better job, and even in the area of building trust, which is how we met, because I'm an author on trust. And Nancy really helps teams understand the dynamic of working in a remote situation. And of course, now with the COVID-19 situation for the past 6 or 8 weeks, we've been all working, most of us anyway, have been working in a virtual way. So Nancy's been kind of busy, I bet, for the past few weeks. So she wrote a wonderful article. She has a blog that she calls Guided Insights, and you can see it. Just go to Google and type in Guided Insights, and it will take you right to her blog. She had a wonderful one here about a couple of weeks ago entitled How Video Meetings Mess with Your Head and How to Make It Better. So it really caught my eye, and I thought it'd be good to have a little interview here and get some of the ideas that you brought out in that article. So Nancy, nice to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here, Bob. Yeah, many of the organizations I've been working with over the last few months, their people have been telling me we have more meetings than ever. We're
Yeah.
working longer hours than ever. And almost all those meetings are video meetings, whether or not they really need video. So they're on video and watching videos all day long.
And according to your article, that gets tiring after a while. I mean, I know a lot of people are complaining about that.
It does get tiring for a lot of reasons. One is, first of all, speaking of trust, we literally cannot see eye to eye. It's impossible in using video. Right now, I'm looking at the camera, which
Yeah.
simulates eye contact. You might feel like I'm looking right at you, but in reality, I can't be looking at you when I'm looking in the camera.
And
And
or if you're looking at the screen and scanning the faces, you're not looking at the camera either.
right, I'm looking away from you if I'm scanning the faces. So
Yeah.
number one is we can't make eye contact. And
Yeah.
without that, it's pretty hard to build trust. So I think teams where members know each other already are having an easier time in this all virtual world.
Oh, I'm
Um,
sure.
but teams where there are new people on board, I met someone yesterday in Australia who just joined the team in the middle of the pandemic. So she had quite a difficult time onboarding because she can't really be meeting with anyone. So lack of ability to see eye to eye is one problem, one way it messes with our head. Another is, I picture if you were sitting at a dinner table with, let's say, 20 people, big, long table, and naturally you would be turning to the people next to you to have a conversation or across from you.
Uh-huh.
Well, on these Zoom meetings where we could have 20 people on at once or more, we are constantly feeling a need to scan every single face the whole time intensively. It's almost like you were constantly at this dinner party doing nothing but scanning faces.
And that leads to fatigue after a while.
It's incredibly taxing and it's unnatural.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, and you know, and it's the whole dynamic of who's talking and when to talk and that kind of stuff becomes cumbersome, and two people start talking at the same time, etc.
Yeah, it's very difficult. That's another thing. We can't have a natural flow of conversation. So if, let's say, there are 10 or 15 or so people on a call, how do you decide who goes next? If everyone's using video, you might have a norm that says raise your hand, physically
Yeah,
raise your hand.
sure.
Or if you're using a meeting application where you can click and have someone raise their hand, well, if I'm looking at the camera, I really can't be seeing who's raising their hand.
Yeah.
Um, and that points to the need, if possible, to have a companion, a colleague, to be providing that scanning and saying, hey, Nancy, wait a second, Bob has a question.
Or there's something in the chat. If you're trying to facilitate a meeting alone and you got 15 people, it's really distracting to try to have to set up this breakout rooms and monitor the chat and still give total attention to the people that you're working with. That blows my mind. I can't do it.
I find it very difficult. I sometimes have to. I'm the only one.
Uh-huh.
But I strongly recommend that people at minimum have someone to scan the chat or the questions if certain apps have chat in one place, questions in another. And then build in natural pauses into your meeting where, let's say if you and I are working together, I might say, okay, let me take a pause. Bob, what are some recurring themes you're seeing in the chat? And then you can say, oh, here are a couple that have come up, versus me straining to listen to people, watch their body language, their
Yeah.
eye contact, and scanning the contents. For a small meeting, casual meeting, yes, but either a virtual learning program or a larger, more complex meeting, you really need to have someone helping.
Yeah, and I picked up a really interesting tip that I used in a class that I was doing, a leadership class. So I'm the host. I mean, I call the meeting. I'm the facilitator, the chief facilitator of the meeting. So I'm the host, and I had an assistant who was the co-host, and so she would have all the powers that I have, except one, and that is that the co-host cannot put people in the breakout rooms.
Right.
Only the host can do that. So what we did is we traded places, and I made her the host. And even though I'm the facilitator, it was my meeting, I played the role of the co-host. Nobody else knew the difference, but she could handle all the breakout room stuff while I was interfacing with the class.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example of understanding the nuances of any tool that you're using, because that's true in Zoom. You can trade that off.
Yep.
Then there's Microsoft Teams, there's Skype for Business, and certain corporate applications, enterprise-wide applications will never let an external person be the host. So that's really important to know, and you bring up a good point, to know what you can authorize someone else to do, and what you must retain the rights to do, or what you want to retain the rights to do.
Yeah, I think I'm struggling right now, Nancy. I'll confess that there's another application where I'm working with another group, and they want to use a different technology than Zoom, and I'm finding it to be really quite cumbersome when I'm trying to share screen in PowerPoint and the video and bounce back and forth. It gets to be a really delicate thing, and so the only defense that I have is practice offline. Just keep working at it until you really do understand it.
I also find having at least two screens really helps. I have a laptop to my right. I'm not using it right now, but I often use that for the Zoom or the video meeting.
I do the same here. You can see that I have a laptop in back of me and a mirror off to the side so that I can look at the laptop while I'm still interfacing with it.
I see. Okay, that's a good technique. And you mentioned something too about sharing screens. So that's for any application you're using, no matter what your role, even if you're a participant and not a leader, you've got to make a conscious choice about what you're going to focus on more. Is it everyone's face and just a little bit on the shared screen? Is it just on the speaker? So most of the apps give you choices about what you're going to focus on. And I think one of the things I've tried that makes a huge difference in not allowing Zoom to mess with my head is turning off my self view. So others can see me, but I can't see myself. And that is cited often as one of the top reasons video meetings make us so crazy, is that it's the constant seeing of ourselves. Even if it's off in the corner, we're subliminally conscious of it at the very least the whole time.
So now that's interesting, because I don't know how to do that. I can stop my video altogether, and then you won't see me either.
In Zoom, on the top right corner, there's 3 dots. And if you click on that, there's a drop-down menu, and I think it's the last choice down is hide self view.
Okay.
And then when you hide your self view, you're so more conscious of everything else around you. So I do that often.
I'm going to try that. That's a good tip.
Another thing that I've been experimenting with is when there, let's say if you have several people on a call or in a training session, and you have a couple people who are giving brief presentations, and I want to say brief, like no more than 2 minutes, or it's deadly. Sometimes what I've done is ask everyone else to turn video off and visually have just the people speaking being shown at that time, and then we turn the videos on. But there are ways that you can intentionally have people turn on and off video to make conversation easier to follow.
That's a good tip.
And another thing too, I just want to say, in this world of COVID, I have the luxury of having my own office. I've worked from home for 26 years, so I have an office. My kids are college age, so they're not going to be running down asking for help with their homework. Well, not usually. And so I have reasonable confidence that I'm not going to be interrupted. We have people, I'm in Zoom meetings all day, or video meetings, where there are kids running in and out, there are cats on the keyboard, there are dogs coming up. So I think we need to allow people to not show their videos all the time, because there's some organizations I know are quite strident about it. You must show your video. Well, I could be in Australia participating at 6 a.m. my time as a concession to someone in the US, and you know what? I don't look that great at 6 in the morning. So I think we have to be flexible, and we have to be kind and patient, and realize that not everyone is in a position to show their video, and so they shouldn't have to.
No, I agree with that. Sure. Yeah. And of course, a good protocol to just leave yourself on mute most of the time. If you're not doing a lot of speaking, just leave yourself on mute. So when the dog barks or something happens, the phone rings or whatever, it's not interrupting the meeting.
Well, I have mixed feelings about that, actually. Yes, if I have a pretty good chance that I'm going to be interrupted, or the lawnmower is going to go off, or there's going to be some ambient noise or some interruptions, yes, leave yourself on mute. At the same time, when we put ourselves on mute, oftentimes, and you see this physically in video meetings, people physically sit back and let someone else take over the conversation.
Sort of zone out.
Yeah, so I was in a wonderful training session last week where the kind of ground rule was, unless we have ambient noise, everyone off mute and everyone on video, and it made a huge difference. So I'd say when it's a rather small group and people have a reasonable chance of not having ambient noise, stay off mute, because putting ourselves on mute gives ourselves permission to recede and not participate.
That's right. And when I do a lot of teaching leadership stuff, and so I'm working with a group right now, and we had our first session last Friday. So it's about 9 people, so it's a small group. And I said, I recommend that you don't use the mute most of the time, because what I want it to be is as spontaneous as it would normally be if we were in a conference room. And if you wanted to speak up, you'd speak up. There's no button that you have to push in order to speak.
Exactly. And speaking of that, speaking of speaking, one method that can work well, especially if it's a pretty large group, whether or not someone's on mute or not, is called stacking, which you've probably may have heard of. And it's basically, let's say there are 3 people who put their hands up. I might just say Robert, John, and Susan in that order, so that people can put their hands down. They know I've acknowledged them. They know they're going to have a chance to speak, and they can relax. And others know that it's not yet their turn to jump in. And I've found that to be incredibly effective.
Yeah, those are good tips. You know, I've always admired you for your skill and background, because for 25 years, you've been working with virtual teams, trying to help people understand how to work well in this kind of environment. And I think you're probably one of the world experts on that by this time. Do you see a big shift in terms of acceptance of this kind of mode of working together is it softening now because of the COVID situation?
Absolutely. For many of the organizations I'm working with, and they range from federal government to pharmaceuticals to nonprofits, I'd say those who have what I call knowledge workers, so people who, as long as they have access to a computer system or to a network or to the appropriate technology, they can do their jobs from home. I see more and more organizations who had been resistant are saying, well, wait a second, I guess we can do this from home. So I don't think many organizations are going to go completely virtual, but I think more are going to give people the choice. And or might say, okay, instead of 5 days a week in the office, we need you in at least 2 days.
Yeah.
Because I think both employers are realizing this works better than we thought, but also employees are thinking, I don't really want to give this up. I love having this flexibility. I feel more productive. What does seem to be missing, because I do a lot of training in this area, the absolute number one challenge people are having working virtually is the loss of social connection. Is that the time that they spent, let's say, on a team call, maybe an hour a week, has to be so compressed that it's full of checklists and status reports rather than some replication of that water cooler that
Yeah.
we are so sorely missing.
Yeah, that's true. But I agree with you. I think that in a lot of organizations that I'm interfacing with, they are predicting that this is a permanent shift, that we're going to shift in the direction of doing more work remotely. And I know one CEO who was really a dyed-in-the-wool. Everybody's here. You know, this is our office. We're all here together. This is how we're productive. This is how we work creatively together. And so I want everybody to be here. No, she did not support people working from home. And she said after the last 6 weeks, she said, I'm 180 degrees the other way around. I really see that this has a lot of value. So it's an interesting transition.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, just thinking about trust, that I think is so vital in today's world of pandemic and everyone working from home, is the need to, at the very least, revisit any team norms that may exist around communications and collaboration, and then reset them and reset expectations.
Great tip.
It's so important that we understand what kind of responsiveness I can expect to you, my teammate, from an email. When we're going to use, let's say, SharePoint or a team portal to load documents versus email. Must I come to every team meeting? What level of participation is expected of me? And so on. Things have become pretty murky, I'd say, especially around communication and collaboration outside of meeting time. And that really needs to be talked through as a team, and they need to develop principles about how they're going to communicate, where, with what frequency, with consistent tools, so that there are no surprises or disappointments.
That's a wonderful tip, because I'm a big advocate of having team behaviors be documented. When you're going through and figuring out what your values are, you also need to figure out how you're going to treat each other in certain circumstances and have that agreed upon. Like, you know, simple things like we're going to act like adults. You know, simple stuff like that allow the team to hold each other accountable if somebody's not using those particular behaviors.
Yeah, and I think for virtual teams, for what we're going through right now, one of the most important areas that teams need to discuss and agree on are norms or principles governing presence. So by that I mean, if I'm, let's say, if I'm using Skype for Business, let's say, and you can see that I'm on or available, and you send me an instant message saying, hey, do you have information on this? But yes, I'm available, but I'm in the middle of a meeting, or I stepped away from my desk to help my kid with their homework or whatever. You might be upset that I don't respond right away. So I think teams really need to talk about what it means to signal if I'm present, since you can't see me, to discuss working hours. So under what hours are vital for for me to be at my desk for our team to succeed? Or there's certain hours we all need to be accessible. Maybe if we think about it, it's only 1 or 2 hours a day, and then the rest can be more flexible. But it's that sense of letting you know that I'm here, that I'm present, then I can respond, or when I can't respond. I think that's so key, because it's easy for frustrations and impatience to build.
Yeah, wonderful tips. I'll look forward to a Guided Insights article on that topic of documenting behaviors, and you could list a few of them like you just did. Be very interesting article. Well, thanks, Nancy, for spending some time with me this morning. It's wonderful to see you again.
Yeah, my
And
pleasure.
I will send you a copy of this video, and you can use it however you wish, and I will be using it here to send people your way.
Okay, thank you so much, Bob. It's been a privilege working with you today.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.